Hello, everyone, and welcome to Orthodoxy. My name is Andy Schmidt, and back with another podcast. Today, it's just me. Thought I'd sit down and kind of do straight to camera, talk about a couple of things that have been going on in the last last week, actually. I think today is 1 week since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And there's been a lot of stuff that has come out since the assassination. I thought I'd come on to a podcast. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what's been going on, what sort of narratives we're seeing, what are some of the things that people are frustrated with in the church and outside of the church. Just wanted to just talk about the entire situation because it's obviously a tragedy. It's horrible to see what has come from all of this, from the assassination attempt. Sometimes moments of catastrophe bring people together, and it feels like doesn't feel like it actually is the opposite with this situation. With the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the divides between both sides are becoming more and more prominent, more obvious, and people are becoming more angry at each other, and we see that in all different types of rhetoric all across social media. And so, I just thought I'd come on, talk a little bit about what some of my thoughts are. Not that it really matters what I think, but I do have this podcast. We are getting new listeners, new subscribers, new followers every day across the platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And so there are new people listening, and there are people who have been listening for years, and they take time, out of their week to listen to me interview people, to listen to me rant about things, to talk about things. And I try my best to come from a biblical perspective, from a conservative perspective, from an Orthodox perspective, from the truth. That's what I try my best to do. And so last week, when Robert P. George and we had scheduled a podcast to interview him, so I could interview him about his new book, Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth, which is a phenomenal book, and people should read it. There's a lot in that book that actually pertains to what's happening today, what happened in the last week, and how we should proceed as a country after these sort of catastrophic and political turning points. Yeah, that's what they are. They're turning points. How do we move forward from this? His book is very helpful. It's not necessarily talking about how to move forward from catastrophic events, but it's telling you exactly what the foundations of speech and truth are, and why we need to ground ourselves in those truths so that we can continue forward as a civilization. But we had planned to talk about that, and that day, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He was shot in the head, shot in the neck by a young, I think 22-year-old man, and who was a leftist, who was a liberal, who thought that Charlie Kirk was a fascist, who was dating a transgender, his roommate, who was a man transitioning to be a woman, apparently. Of course, you can't transition to be a woman, but you get the point. And so Robert and I talked, and he made a lot of really good points, a lot of very important points. And then as I've kind of talked to people and listened and read throughout the past week, seeing what different people are saying about what has happened, I've come to a couple of different conclusions about a couple of different things. I've been talking to pastors, interacting with pastors, a couple of them. I've been talking with friends on the East Coast here in the Midwest. I've been talking, obviously, with my wife a lot about this situation, my family, my parents. How do you make sense of all of this? What do you do about the fact that both political parties, like Robert George said, are no longer arguing over how to get what means to use to get to a shared end, to get to a shared vision and goal for the country. No, they actually, both parties have different goals for the country, and both parties have different means. And so both parties, because they have different goals and different means, have fundamentally oppositional ideologies at the core of their worldview that are not compatible with one another. And so what do you do when a country is full of people who, at the deepest level of thought and belief, fundamentally disagree with each other? What do you actually do about that? What can you actually practically do? Whether that be politically, theologically, what are you supposed to do? And I think that that's the question that a lot of people are asking and are having a difficult time trying to actually answer, because it's not entirely easy to figure out what to do in these situations when it is a fact that there are tons of people on the political left who think that it's justifiable to murder your political opponents. And the number of people that think it's justifiable to murder your political opponents goes up the younger the generations are. So millennials, Gen Zers think it's more appropriate. They think it's okay to just start killing people when they don't agree with them. They think that that's justifiable. What does that mean? What do you do? And so there have been a couple of questions that have been raised on social media related to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. One of them being the one that I'm mostly interested in. What should churches be doing right now? What should they be talking about? People said if your pastor didn't mention Charlie Kirk, you got to find a new church. If your pastor isn't talking about the assassination the assassination last Sunday, you got to find a new church. A lot of people are saying that on the political right. You got even people on the political right who are going further than that. I saw Joel Webbin, who I don't really know much about him. I know he's a clown. I know he has no theological understanding. I know that he's basically on social media as a pastor, I think. I don't know. I don't even I feel like that's you don't want to misuse the word pastor, but this guy thinks that he's a pastor. He goes online and he just sort of gives far right wing talking points that are kind of rooted in authoritarian ideology and rooted in a false understanding of theological principles. And he tweets this thing out or posts it on X. He says, "Make America hate again." And that's sort of the far right. You've got people like Candace Owens, who her first thought was, let's make this whole assassination thing about me. Let's make this all about me. There's a wonderful post on X, and it was a meme. It was a picture of Candace Owens looking at herself in the mirror, and she was kind of pointing at herself, and it said, "Get in there and make it about you." It's like her pointing at herself, "Get in there and make it about you." I'll put the picture up on the YouTube if you're watching it on YouTube. And so Candace is what she did immediately. She started making this all about her, how she knew that Charlie Kirk was going against the big Jewish regime, that the Jews are really behind this. The Jews wanted to kill Charlie Kirk. That's the shtick that she's been on for a year now. She often fails to show any evidence of anything that she's talking about. She says that she has all of these sources, and then she never actually cites her sources. And it always comes back to Benjamin Netanyahu and the Jews, and they're the ones who killed Charlie Kirk, and they're the ones who pulled off the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, and they're the ones who are running the big media companies like the Daily Wire and Fox News and CNN. They're controlling the outlets. They're running the whole world. The Jews are doing it. No one else is doing it. So it's Candace's mission to make every single thing that happens in the political realm just come back to a bitter hatred for the Jews. So that's what Candace Owens has done. Tucker Carlson has dabbled in that. And that's sort of where the far right is at. So they're just blaming the Jews for everything because they're intellectual cowards and they have no understanding and they don't know how to actually track a news story and take the evidence as it comes and put pieces together and try to figure out where things are going. No, they have all of these preconceived ideologies that they bring in to these news stories. They say to themselves, Candace Owens says to herself, the Jews are ruining the world. Somehow, the Jews are ruining the world. I hate the Jews. The world is chaotic. I need somebody to blame. It obviously can't be myself because she's a narcissistic person. She thinks that she's the center of the world. It obviously can't be her. So it has to be some other conspiratorial entity. And so she blames the Jews. And that's what she's been doing for a long time, never showing any evidence. Tucker Carlson is dabbling in it. And there are many people on the right who just think that the Jews killed Charlie Kirk when there's absolutely no evidence of any of that. And it's a ridiculous accusation. And look, if the Jews killed Charlie Kirk, I'm fine. I'm fine with seeing the evidence. The problem is there's none. And that's what keeps being brought up by these people, like Candace Owens, who are obsessed with finding somebody else to blame for the problems that they themselves have helped create in the country. And so there's that side of things. Now, then you get to the other side of things. You've got the left-wing lunatics who are happy, who are praising the slaughter of their political opponent all over social media, Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, on X. They're on Blue Sky, which is like this freaking weird liberal cesspool social media app where all the liberals go because they were mad at Elon Musk and they made their own social media platform. And on there, they're doing the same thing. They're praising the slaughter, the murder of Charlie Kirk. They're happy about it. People are losing their jobs because of this. Okay, so there's this whole spectrum, right? So you got the Jews did it over here. You got this is a good thing over here. You got everybody kind of muddling around in the middle of that, trying to figure out what the hell actually happened. And you got people on kind of the more, let's just say, centrist right side of things who are getting people on the left fired for celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk. And then you've got this whole question of free speech. Is this free speech? Are we going to allow for people to lose their jobs over this? Isn't this a violation of free speech? How is it that people can go and they can just start calling employers and saying, hey, your employee just posted a TikTok saying that he's happy about the slaughter of his political opponent, and that person loses their job. Now the left is flipping out. Just last night, Jimmy Kimmel indefinitely was pulled off of ABC because he, in a certain way, mocked the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and the political left is going ballistic about this. They're very confused. They're like, wait a second. How is it that we're losing? Isn't this free speech? Can't people just say whatever they want? And so there's this big question surrounding, okay, well, what is free speech and how does it apply to the market? And can private entities fire people? And the left is saying this is authoritarian, this is fascist. They're pushing further down the rabbit hole of claiming that all of their political opponents are fascists, are Nazis, are like Hitler. And then when people act on that sort of rhetoric and go murder people that they don't agree with, then they say, whoa, we never called for violence. Now we've got a gun problem. We got to take away the guns. It's the guns that's doing it. It's not the fact that people are watching CNN, MSNBC, reading the New York Times, and reading the Atlantic and all of these garbage left-wing news outlets. It's not that has nothing to do with people murdering other people. Ideology is completely detached. These are completely compartmentalized situations, right? So what the shooter believes has nothing to do with him killing Charlie Kirk. And then you've got all these people saying, well, this is just a mental health issue. It's just mental health. It's the same compartmentalization. It's just mental health. It's just mental health. That's just sort of a blanket for people who don't want to think about it. Just mental health. I don't want to think about ideology. I don't want to think about the nature of man. I don't want to think about the problems in our society. So let's just say it's mental health. Let's just put all these people in this category of mental health. Let's just say it has nothing to do with left-wing liberal nihilistic ideology. Let's just call it mental health. Let's just say this big ambiguous mental health. Just slap that on there, and then I don't have to think about it anymore. And we can say it's just mental health. It has nothing to do with ideology. Nothing at all. Okay. So you've got all these different narratives, and then you have a narrative, the most reasonable narrative, the one that actually is true, the most truthful narrative that's based off of the facts of the situation, which is a lot of conservatives just saying, yeah, this guy was politically motivated. Obviously, he thought that Charlie Kirk was a fascist. He was text messaging with his boyfriend, transgender boy, whatever, right after he committed the murder, and saying that some people who hate like Charlie Kirk hates needs to just be eradicated. They're irredeemable. They're unforgivable. You just need to get rid of them. And he confessed to it in these text messages. He confessed to the crime in Discord chats. And so, and his roommate, his boyfriend, whatever, is cooperating with the FBI. He was under suicide watch for a while, but he admitted to the crime. It was obviously politically motivated based off of the text messages, based off of what the engravings were on the bullets, based off of what the killer actually said and believed in Discord chats, all these things that were coming out. And so that's just the facts. That's the facts that the FBI is releasing, and people are reading through it. And a lot of fair-minded, competent, and literate human beings are coming to this conclusion that this was a political assassination. And it was a political assassination from somebody who is left-leaning, who is a liberal, who is a progressive, and that person's own family said that this shooter had been, over the last several years, becoming more and more radicalized into left-wing ideology. And that seems to be the actual narrative. That's actually what's happening. And so you have the lunatics who think it was the Jews. You've got the left-wingers who don't really care who it was, but they're happy that somebody on the right died and got murdered. And then you've got the people who are actually looking at the facts and actually coming to natural conclusions. Now, I will say about the people on the left, I've had some very frustrating conversations with progressives in the last week in which the narrative that is being pushed on some of the mainstream left-wing news outlets is that the killer was MAGA. He was a right-wing MAGA guy who had like these narratives don't make any sense. It don't make any sense because Charlie Kirk is MAGA. Charlie Kirk is populist MAGA. I mean, I was watching his podcast the other day. They had Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and Michael Knowles on there, and the host of the podcast, I can't remember, it was Charlie Kirk's co-host when Charlie Kirk was hosting the show. He said that prior to the election of 2024, Charlie Kirk had garnered some 15 billion impressions across all social media platforms, making him one of the most influential people, if not the most influential person in the country related to politics and the 2024 election. In some cases, people think that he has more name recognition than even Donald Trump. Okay, which is complete. It's fascinating, but it's also just crazy to think that that's how much influence that he actually had going from campus to campus. I knew Charlie Kirk when I was in high school. Everybody knows Charlie Kirk. It is true, and he has massive name recognition. All that to say, though, that there are people on the left who are media ghouls who spend their days trying to blame everything in society on the alt-right MAGA fascist, this sort of fake narrative that they've created about Donald Trump and the Republicans. And so they're saying that that this kid was a fascist. It never makes sense to me. Why would you try to kill somebody who was on your own side? It doesn't make. It just takes a little bit of logic. It just takes a little bit of reasonable thinking and of looking at the evidence to recognize that narrative is completely false and it's being pushed by people whose main aim and goal in life is to separate the country and to push for civil war. I actually think that these people want there to be civil war. They've been inciting violence against Donald Trump and the MAGA movement for a decade. They've been calling Trump and all of his followers neo-Nazis, Nazis, Hitler-esque. They've been calling them fascist for a decade. That's the language that you use against an opponent who you actually want to murder, who you actually want to get rid of. Because it takes no logic. It takes a little tiny bit of logic, just basically none, to figure out that if you call your political opponent a fascist and a Nazi and a Hitler for like a decade, that people are going to think to themselves, if they hear that enough, they're going to think to themselves, hey, maybe we should kill the Hitler, Nazi, fascist guy. Maybe we should murder him, and maybe we should murder all of his followers and all of the people who voted for him and the people who are close within his influence, the people who helped get him elected. Maybe that's the next step. Let's just murder those people. And that's what's happening. The left-wing media has pushed that narrative for a decade, and now young people are saying, hey, it's time to start murdering everybody. It's time to start murdering everybody because we're nihilistic. We have nothing to live for anyways. We grew up in the public school systems. They taught us that we were a bunch of monkeys that came from a random soup 85 bazillion years ago, and there's a big bang that created the world, but there's no uniting narrative and nothing actually matters and everything's nihilistic and life has no meaning. And so what we devolve into is these sort of sex and power hungry animals who will do anything to gain just a little bit more sex and a little bit more power. And so what the left wing does is they enable those people through the same rhetoric over and over and over again, through like hypnosis, basically saying your political opponents are fascists, they're fascists, they're fascists, they're fascists, over and over and over again. They internalize that over a period of 10 years and they put a bullet through a guy's neck in front of his family. They try to put a bullet through Donald Trump's head twice. Which I do think the fact that they didn't kill Trump because he turned his head a little bit to the side is a miracle. I actually think it was an act of God. Call me a crazy Christian nationalist or whatever. I think it was an act of God that Donald Trump wasn't shot in the head. And I also think it's an atrocity to the United States of America that the person who fired the bullet, that we have no information on that guy. We have no clue who he is. We don't know where he came from. He apparently didn't have a phone. He's only like 21-year-old, 22-year-old in the entire country that didn't have a phone. He didn't have social media. He was not connected to anything. He was just some random ghost that showed up one day with a gun, tried to kill the president, and then he was gone. That was that. We have no clue what happened there. None at all. I've heard nothing about that story. Nothing. And this is the narrative of the left. Your political opponent deserves to be slaughtered. They deserve to be murdered. Get rid of them, okay? And that's what they're trying to do now. That's what they're doing because that's what they've meditated on for a decade. And the reality here is what that creates is a situation in which a lot of the freedoms that we took for granted in the United States begin to dissolve. For instance, freedom of speech begins to dissolve. The open marketplace of ideas begins to dissolve. When it becomes true that if you speak your opinion, and if I don't like your opinion, now I get to go and put a bullet through your head. Knowles has said this many, many times. A lot of people on the political right have said this many, many times. When that happens, that means we don't have a free marketplace of ideas anymore. Okay, freedom is contingent on rules. One of the rules for freedom is that we don't murder each other. That's one of the rules that freedom rests upon. That's why this sort of negative liberty, do whatever you want, freedom from restraint is nonsense, actually. You need restraint to have true freedom. You need rules to have actual freedom. That's one of the fundamental facts of a positive liberty. It's the freedom to pursue virtue. It's the freedom to exist within a structured society in which there has been order that has been placed, that has been given. These rights, the order, the law of the country has been given by the leadership that has been put into place by God. And those rules, that law helps you pursue freedom. It keeps you contained. It makes sure that you don't indulge the flesh and go do things like kill people that you disagree with. And so now we don't have an open marketplace of ideas. Now it's if you tell people that you are conservative, that you believe in the Bible, that you like Donald Trump, now your life is at risk. Now your life is at risk because there could be some person out there who's been internalizing a decade of propaganda from the political left that anybody who thinks that Donald Trump is doing a halfway decent job, who likes Donald Trump, is an actual fascist and a Nazi, and obviously the fascists and the Nazis need to be murdered. Well, that person could find you. And they could do what they did to Charlie Kirk to you. So it puts it was Chesterton says, you need to end the thoughts that end thought. You need to end the thoughts that end thought. And one of the thoughts that ends thought is that your political opponents, all of them, no matter what they say or think or do, are fascist and Nazi. That's one thought that actually ends thought, because when you tell everybody that everybody is and when you tell everybody on the left that everybody is a Nazi who disagrees with you, that they're all fascists, at that point we don't have open dialogue anymore. Those people don't want to have a conversation. They don't want to debate anymore. They just want to get rid of you. They just want to eliminate you. And when they start to eliminate you, you don't have a free marketplace of ideas. Now, the argument that I've heard that's the most compelling on the right is that we need to get rid of this idea that the best way to get out of this is through debate. And let's just debate it out. And let's just talk. We really need to dialogue with each other. Look, I get the desire to do that. And I think that dialogue and debate has fixed many problems in this country. But when you dialogue and debate, it's that action of having a conversation is predicated on the idea that you are talking to an image bearer, that you are talking to somebody who is made in the image of God, who has inherent and unalienable rights given to them by God. Okay? When you don't believe that, when one side of the conversation doesn't believe that, you're no longer able to have dialogue. You're no longer able to debate because it will devolve into a power structure. And if one person believes that they're talking to an image bearer and isn't willing to, and is saying to themselves, look, we can disagree and that's okay. And I'm not going to do anything. We're going to leave it here. The other side is saying, no, I'm not going to stop until you agree with me. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to put a bullet through your head. Then you can't have conversations. If those are the two parties, you can't have conversations. You can't debate. It doesn't work anymore. Charlie Kirk went from campus to campus to campus all around the country for a very long time, having those debates, engaging in civil dialogue with people who he disagreed with. And they got heated and they got intense and there was feisty exchanges. But that was the beauty of the American way, that we could have conversations with people that we disagreed with and we could walk away afterwards and be okay with the fact that, yeah, we don't see eye to eye on this thing, but you know what? We'll come back. We'll hash it out again tomorrow. We'll try to come to a reasonable conclusion. We'll try to come to an agreement. We'll just be okay with each other not agreeing. That's what that's what America was kind of built on, this idea that we could debate. But it was only built on that in as much as people believed that the other person they were talking to was an actual valuable human being. When you don't think that that's an actual valuable human being that you're discussing, that you're having a conversation with, then you're going to do crazy things. You're going to start dehumanizing them. You're going to start treating them like animals. You're going to start rationalizing things in your mind. You're going to start internalizing messages that tell you that this isn't a human person, that you need to demonize, that you need to dehumanize. You need to get rid of them. You need to get them off the planet. They're going to destroy everybody. They're going to destroy you and your ideology and your identity and everything. And so you need to kill them. You need to murder. That's what these people are internalizing. That's what they're thinking. And that's what young people have been taught to internalize and think for decades in the public school system, that the conservatives have done nothing to stop because they don't actually care about solving the real problems in the country. They have done nothing to end the public school system, which is the head of the snake. If you got rid of the public school system, you would get rid of 80% of the problems in this country. You would get rid of 80%, probably more. If you said to parents, hey, it's actually your responsibility to raise your kids, not the state's. So raise your kids, put together homeschooling groups and create wonderful private schools, but the state's not going to do it for you. Sorry. You're all rich out of your mind. You're all rich out of your mind. And actually people argue, well, what happens to the people who don't have money? What happens to the people who are poor and they can't put together or they can't put their kids into private school or they can't buy the resources? Okay, here's what would happen. I'll tell you what would happen. It's the same thing that happened through all of American history, right? You know what would happen through all of American history? When people got sick and they couldn't afford it, when people didn't have the education because they didn't have the money, guess what happened? Americans innovated. American Christians, mostly Christians, put together hospitals and they helped the poor. And they helped the poor and they fed the poor, they helped the sick, and they created new institutions. They gave their money to help people. I mean, they put together free institutions for people who didn't have the resources. They put together private schools and they let kids in who didn't have the money. They went out and they got donors. They went out because we're the most charitable country in the world, and we have been for a very, very, very long time because there are a lot of rich people who give charitably to good causes. So that problem would be eradicated fairly quickly if the government got the hell out of the way and stopped indoctrinating kids into believing that there's nothing in life that has any meaning and that they can throw their life away for the cause of a federal government machine that the left has created and has implemented through the public school system. And so that's what this all is. This young person going to the public schools his entire life, maybe grew up in a conservative family and had his ideas through public school system, through the internet, through conversing with other people who were like-minded on the internet. And basically what happened was he went through all of that and he became radicalized, because that's what happens when you tell people for 20 some years that they have no meaning in life, that they come from a big soup 80 bazillion years ago, and that there's no actual telos of life. There's no actual meaning for life. There's no actual end. There's no actual meaning in anything that you do. It doesn't really matter if you get married or you don't get married. Whatever you want to do sexually, do it, but just don't push your sexual ideology on me. You keep what you do in the bedroom, but you can do whatever you want. And, trans yourself, cut yourself up, murder babies. Nothing actually matters. Nothing matters. And do whatever you want. And what happens is people say to themselves, oh, hey, nothing matters. I'm going to do whatever I want. And then when they do whatever they want, they do what's sinful because their nature is evil. And so they engage in Marxist power games in which their primary aim in life is to eliminate and destroy anybody who gets in their way. And they see those people as obstacles rather than image bearers, people who are made in the image of God, who are Christ, who are made in the image of God and who have inherent value. They have inherent value, and there's inherent meaning in their life, and God actually does have a good plan for them. They don't care about that. They don't care about that. They do not believe that. And to be honest with you, as somebody who went to some of the most secular public schools in America in Madison, Wisconsin, and I grew up in a Christian home, by the time I was out of those schools, and my Christian home was like hardcore, I knew the stuff, I believed in the Marxist lies and the postmodern lies and the idea that there's nothing in life that actually matters. Everything's about power, and you need to use your rhetoric to dominate the people across from you. They have no inherent value, and you can do whatever you want to other people. And I believed that subconsciously, but I operated out of it. And I would tell people, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Well, no, I wasn't. I was actually a secularist. I was actually an atheistic secularist hedonist who did whatever the hell I wanted whenever I wanted. And I was a demon. And that's what most kids are coming out of the public school systems like. They're just demons. They're doing whatever they want. And I'm saying demons, not that they're actual demons, but they operate like demons, agents of Satan. Okay? That's what this is all created. And the only way to fix the problem is to restore order, to the marketplace of ideas. There are rules, everybody. We have to restore order. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I wasn't, I like that Elon Musk bought Twitter and made it so that, you couldn't just kick somebody off if they didn't want to get the vaccine. You couldn't kick somebody off of Twitter if they didn't want to get the vaccine, or if they criticized the jab or something like that. He bought it. He restored free speech on there. But I thought one of the first things I thought to myself, I think that was a net positive, but I thought to myself at the time, this is going to kind of devolve pretty quickly. Because you're going to see now with unhinged free speech how insanely immoral our culture is. And I think that that's basically what X has turned into. And it's hard not to get sucked into it. A lot of these free speech platforms have turned into that. People just raging at the machine, people just going off on other people just belittling other people, trashing other people. And sometimes actually that's necessary. Sometimes you have to call people out. The problem is that these like devices, the phones and the social media, like they create this alternate reality in which when we even talk about the marketplace of ideas, a lot of people think about social media. I don't think that that's actually primarily the marketplace of ideas. The marketplace of ideas is places like where Charlie Kirk would go, the campuses, and to talk to people that you disagree with. This real life, face-to-face, interpersonal interactions, dialogue, conversations. That's the marketplace of ideas. Now, Twitter and X, those are all places in which ideas can be expressed, but they're rarely ever expressed in their entirety because it optimizes short opinions, and it optimizes and it rewards short opinions. It rewards dumbed down thought, and so people can't actually engage in a marketplace of free marketplace of ideas because they don't actually have thought out opinions, and they just kind of spit whatever fleshly impulse comes out of their mouth onto the social media platform and kind of enrage everybody, and it becomes this huge rage-filled cesspool. And that's why people like Candace Owens are so successful. She's so successful at exploiting that fact and exploiting the fact that most people are governed by their emotions. They don't care about the facts of reality. They're fundamentally postmodernists, which seems like a contradiction in terms, but they're fundamentally postmodernists, and they're operating out of a Marxist power game in which they think that everything is about winning and destroying the opposite side. And so Candace, who I literally don't know if Candace is literate, is exploiting that because she's highly emotional. She has no evidence for anything that she says. She blames one group of people for every problem that exists in society, and she's incredibly angry all the time. And that's the recipe for disaster. And you've got a bunch of people in the country who have those exact same attributes, who think that way, who don't read books, who are highly emotional, who think that emotions trump logic, emotions trump reason. And when they hear somebody that's incredibly emotional, they take the emotion and they equate the emotion with reason, and the emotion with logic, and the emotion with purpose, and the emotion with truth. And that's fundamentally flawed. It's flawed biblically. From a biblical perspective, our emotions need to be put in check, need to be put within the confines of logic, reason, and obviously the commandments of the Lord, the statutes of the Lord, and the teachings of Christ. If you let those things flip, if you let the emotions trump the rest of those things, all of those things become distorted, and then you get chaos. And that's what we're seeing on social media right now. And so in a lot of ways, we don't actually have a marketplace of free and open ideas where people are engaging in good dialogue and trying to get to the bottom of things. Nobody's doing that. Very rarely on X. I use X, and I got to get off of it because it's not good for me. It's horrible. Like most of the time on X, you're not engaging in those sorts of debates. Sometimes I will get into a debate with somebody on X that's actually feels legitimate, but it takes time. You got to type your argument out and stuff. And it's not even the phone itself with the little keyboard is not even optimized in and of itself as a device to be able to put together full comprehensive thoughts and opinions to be able to engage in proper dialogue for the sake of coming to some particular end that is good. That's not what this is all optimized for. This is all optimized for individualistic, short, outrageous kind of, I don't know what word I'm looking for right now, but just short and outrageous statements. That's kind of what all of the devices in and of themselves and the social media platforms are optimized for. And that's what people are using them for. And so they're not engaging in actual free speech. That's why I've always said that podcasting is the best form of social media, whatever you want to call podcasting. It's the best form. It's the best because Joe Rogan can go and do a 4-hour podcast with somebody. Let them get their whole thought out. They can banter. They can go back and forth. They can debate. And it's a healthy conversation where you're face to face with somebody. You're talking with somebody. You're having a conversation. You're getting to the bottom of it. You're not cutting each other off. You're not trying to blast each other. You're not treating the other person like they're a piece of garbage. You're trying to have a conversation. Long form podcasting, I've always thought was the best, like the peak of internet, whatever the internet has become, it's like the peak of it. It's the peak of it. That and obviously, essays, written articles, things like that. Those are very helpful as well. Reporting, that's all helpful. But these short bursts of fleshly wickedness that you're seeing on social media, that isn't a free marketplace of ideas. That's a cesspool of immorality, a cesspool of wickedness. And so there is all of these questions that we have been trying to figure out for the past almost 20 years. You know, the iPhone came out and was like 2008, 2007, 2005, I don't know, a while back, almost 20 years ago. And with that, you had these, you had Facebook, and then you had, Instagram, and you had X and Twitter, and you had all of these different social media platforms. You had Vine back in the day, which died, and then you got TikTok. And once that sort of those platforms open up, YouTube, once all of these platforms open up to the world and people had these devices, the whole game changed. The whole game changed. If you look at the statistics, in 2012, when over 50% of high schoolers had a smartphone, you see astonishing statistics. Dropout rates go up, teen pregnancy rates go up, suicide rates go up, homicide rates go up among young people. All of the bad things that you don't want to see in young people skyrocket after they get smartphones. And yet we didn't really do anything about it. We just kept giving everybody smartphones at younger ages. The average age that a kid watches porn for the first time, a boy, is like 5 or 6 years old now, because a lot of them have iPads and they have smartphones at that age. And they've got stupid parents who hate them, who give them these devices, give them a loaded gun and say, hey, put it to your temple, pull the trigger, hope that it doesn't kill you. It always does. It always does kill them, because you're giving them a loaded gun and you're putting it to their head and you're telling them, pull the trigger, hope it doesn't kill you. So there's been like 2 decades of what the hell is going on questions, okay? We got the internet. Before that, the internet then turned into, okay, now we've got these massive social media platforms. Facebook was the very first massive social media platform. Everybody could have an opinion. Everybody could have a voice. You no longer have the institutions. You no longer have these massive media outlets who control a lot of the narrative, who control the language, who control what's happening. And in a lot of cases, that was good. But in a lot of cases, that was very bad, because that enabled people who had never done any work, who had never done any research, who are illiterate, who don't understand anything. It enabled those people to have a voice and to put their voice into the public square in a way that would be distorting, in the way that would ruin people's lives in a lot of ways. Because I know a lot of friends, I know a lot of people who haven't read a book in the last 5 years, and yet they have an opinion on everything that happens. Societally, politically, theologically, they got an opinion. They got opinions on things that they don't even know what the words that they're saying even mean. They have opinions about everything. Everybody's got an opinion about everything, and no one's doing any research on anything. And so when Facebook comes out, when all these social media platforms come out, it's like, hey, everybody's voice matters. But that's just fundamentally not true. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about the natural hierarchy in life, in reality. I mean, there are natural hierarchies. Now, wherever you go, there's 3 or more people, there's a hierarchy, okay? And within different realms, within different societies, within different groups of people, that hierarchy shifts and changes, okay? When I am with my children, when I'm at my house, in my family, in that group, I am at the top of the hierarchy because I'm the man, I'm the husband, I'm the father, okay? I'm at the top, okay? When I go to work, I've got a boss. I'm no longer at the top, so the hierarchy shifts, it changes. What social media did is it basically technologized egalitarianism, turning everybody into having an equal playing field, and saying, hey, everybody can have an opinion, even if you are nowhere even in the hierarchy of knowledge on a particular topic, you can have an opinion on it. And everybody started having opinions on everything. And at first it was like memes and jokes and funny videos, and people kind of like handled it decently because we had come off of all of human history, not just having opinions about everything. So people were generally civil. And then very quickly that turned into something completely different. And after 20 years, it's devolved into people like Candace Owens, who would have never been allowed to even speak 30 years ago, having the most pathetic and insane opinions about things and putting it out to tens of millions of people every single day, and tens of millions of people internalizing those messages. Now you have people on the political, and what happens is you get those people and they're saying insane things. They're going nuts. The left has their people doing the exact same thing, and then you got your narrative that you can choose to listen to. You can choose to agree with. You can choose to only pump that narrative into your system, and you're pumping it in like a drug, and whatever that narrative is gives you the right to demonize whatever other group it is, because there's very few of these narratives that are actually true, and there's very few of these narratives that actually have a proper understanding of anthropology and human nature, which is essential for having public discourse. It's essential for having public discourse. So Candace Owens doesn't know that the nature of man is evil. The left-wing media doesn't know that the nature of man is evil, which, by the way, if you can see where I'm going, they're both part of the same narrative. They're both part of there's all these meta-narratives that they're pushing, but they're both part of the same liberal narrative, okay? Because they both assume the exact same Rousseauian, Freudian, anthropological presupposition. That's what they both agree with. They're just expressing themselves in different ways. The left is expressing itself in demonizing Donald Trump and anybody who disagrees with the institutional regimes that they put into place that over the past 100 years that they worship and that they get their security and their freedom and their money and their retirement from and their prestige from. And on the right, you got Candace Owens, who also is a liberal, who is expressing it in, the Jews are the bad guys, and her goal is to maintain, again, the same sorts of things. She wants to maintain her finances, her money, her retirement, her big mansion, her nice neighborhood. She wants to preserve all of that. These people want to preserve the exact same thing. They're all just trying to preserve their material goods. They're all trying to preserve their golden calves, their little gods, okay? And they're all doing it through a multitude of meta-narratives that are kind of that are all rooted in the same fundamental narrative, which is a liberal negative liberty narrative in which the main end and goal in life is to remove all restraint, to do whatever one wants to do, and to say whatever one wants to say. And when you have people on both the right and on the left believing in that same anthropological worldview, and it's expressing itself in different ways, you get like mass chaos, because neither of those sides actually agree, neither of them think that they agree with each other, but they do in presupposition. And so you get this mass chaos in which people are infighting against each other, even though they all agree with the same thing. And because they're all rooted in vices and evil and sin, the whole entire marketplace just turns into a cesspool of immorality, which is exactly what it's turned into today, which is exactly why Charlie Kirk, who wasn't a liberal, who didn't agree with Candace Owens, he didn't agree with the left-wing media, he was an actual Christian conservative, he believed in the narrative of the scriptures, which is the true narrative, and he opposed the false narrative of liberalism. People like him get shot in the head. That's what happens, because what happens is, if you indulge in your immorality for long enough in the public square, if you have enough people who have not read anything, who have no idea what they're talking about, who are completely governed by emotions, and the majority of people in the public square having conversations are those people, it devolves into murder very quickly, because that's the nature of man. Cain and Abel is the first story. It devolves into murder. And so they murder the people that they disagree with. This side, the left, the liberals, they murdered Charlie Kirk. And the first thing then that people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are going to try to do immediately is try to use that murder to one up the other side, because they're engaging in the Marxist power game immediately. Okay, so Candace Owens, well, we got to blame the Jews. We got to one up the other side. We got to get rid of the Jews, and we got to get rid of, Candace didn't even talk about transgenderism, really. She didn't really talk about transgenderism, because I don't think that she actually cares about transgenderism that much. She made the claim that Macron, the French prime minister's wife, is a man, which she's going to get sued for, which I hope she gets sued into oblivion for. But she doesn't really care about the transgenderism issue, because she's coming from the same presuppositional ideology. What you're going to see is these two sides are going to keep fighting. They're going to kind of try to one-up each other with the narrative. And they're all going to come here. It's the horseshoe effect. And they're all going to come together in the middle, Candace Owens and frickin' Rachel Maddow, and they're all going to agree, because of one thing that both of those parties agree on is that they hate the Jews. They're all going to agree that the Jews are doing everything, and that they're pulling all the strings, and that we need to eliminate the Jews, because that's the one uniting narrative among the alt-right and the alt-left. That's the far left. That's the one uniting narrative, is that the Jews are the bad guys. We need to get rid of the Jews. We need to murder the Jews, and we need to have them eliminated from society. And there are theological reasons for that I've talked about in previous podcasts. But that's where it's going to devolve into. This horseshoe effect in which it'll meet in the middle, in which people like Rachel Maddow and Jimmy Kimmel will come kumbaya hand in hand with Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and say, look, it's the Jews. It's the Jews. We got to get rid of the Jews. We've run out of everything else. We've run out of all of our other scapegoats. Let's get rid of the Jews. Because that's a tale as old as time. That's what they've been trying to do from the beginning. People have tried to get rid of the Jews. And look, I'm not making a case that the Jews are Christians. I don't think Jews are Christians. I think Jews are going to go to hell, the vast majority of them, because they don't believe in Jesus. What I do know is that Jews are the last remaining physical remnant of Christ on earth. Okay? They have the same ethnicity as Christ. They look like Christ. Ethnically, literally their skin. They look like Jesus. That physical, material ethnicity is indicative of Jesus in heaven right now as an ethnic Jew, because he was a Jew. And people are so sinful, they're so evil, and they will do anything not to deal with their own wickedness, and they will do anything to oppose Christ, that even if they see a people who don't believe in Christ, who reject the gospel, who reject Jesus, who reject everything that the Bible stands for, those people still are from the same ethnic lineage as Christ. And what the goal of the non-Christian is, and what the goal of the liberal is, and what the goal of Satan is to eradicate Christ fully and completely. That's his goal. That's it. That's the goal of sin. Get rid of God, 100%. And they've done that in almost every way, philosophically, theologically, politically. They've gotten rid of Christ in like almost every way. There's only one more way. There's only one more thing that we need to get rid of before we're into our utopian whatever. And that's the Jews. Because they smell a little bit too much like Jesus. They look a little bit too much like him. Yeah, they don't believe in what he believes in, but we need to get rid of everything just in case. We need to get rid of all of it. And this is subconsciously fueling the left and the Candace Owens of the world. And they're going to meet in the middle one day, and they're going to say to each other, let's just murder all the Jews. Because it's a tale as old as time, and you could see it coming from a mile away if you know history, if you could read, if you did read. You would know that she's a lunatic, and you would know that the people on the left are insane. And the people on the left are going to get to the point where they're going to realize that blaming Trump for everything isn't working anymore. It's not working, so they're going to shift. They're going to pivot. They're going to start blaming Benjamin Netanyahu and the Jews, which a lot of the young people have already done. People in Gen Z and millennials have called for the eradication of the state of Israel. They want to get rid of Israel. They want to commit a full genocide on the entire state of Israel. They want to murder every single Jew on the planet. Many young people in the West believe that. In Europe and in the United States, they want to get rid of all the Jews. They want Hamas and the Islamic terrorists to run the Middle East. They want them to rape as many women as they can, to murder as many people as they can, and they're pushing false narratives about this. They're pushing false news stories. They're making fake videos, fake images to conjure up this paranoia and hysteria among young people who are governed by their emotions, and make those people hate the Jews and create this whole narrative, this whole picture of the IDF that is these monsters who shoot and kill kids and murder everybody and kill a bunch of civilians and are running everything from behind the scenes. The Mossad. You know how many times I've heard this shit every freaking day from people? The Mossad's running stuff. The Mossad's running everything. The Mossad killed Charlie Kirk. The Mossad. No evidence at all. No, literally no evidence. Not a single shred of evidence, but it's the Mossad. It's the Mossad. You know why? Because it's easy. It's easy. I want the Mossad to they did it. No one else did it. It's got to be the Mossad. It has to be the Mossad. It's got to be the Jews. The Jews did it. They control the world. Can't do anything. Well, they're going to try to do something about it, but it's the Jews. And if people would just recognize that it's the Jews, we get rid of the Jews. And if we get rid of the Jews, then we get rid of whatever physical remnant of Christ there is in the ethnicity, in the DNA, and we could get rid of that. You could just get rid of it. And that's the goal. Both sides will meet in the middle. You'll see it. They'll meet at the peak of that horseshoe, and they'll agree on one thing, and it's that we need to eradicate the Jews. And the problem with churches who have terrible theology on the Jewish people, who don't know how to read the book of Romans, who don't know how to read Revelation, who don't know how to understand Paul clearly says in the book of Romans, I did a 2.5-hour podcast with Jared Compton on this, that the people of Israel, the ethnicity of Israel, of the Jews, actually still matters. It actually has significance, and that we as Gentiles are being grafted into that family, and that they are still God's chosen people, and that he will bring them back, that he's using the Gentiles to bring them back to himself because he loves them. There is a deep theology in Scripture. I'm not a dispensationalist, by the way, covenantalist all the way. But there is this is what happens when people don't read their Bible. So what happens when pastors get into the pastorate who don't know how to read commentaries, who don't know how to understand what the Bible says, who don't know how to preach, and who are being completely controlled by a false narrative, a false liberal narrative, in which their main aim and goal in life, whether consciously or subconsciously, is to exploit the flesh and use it for their own personal gain. And that's exactly what they're doing on the political right and on the political left. And you're going to see it come together, and they're going to try to kill all the Jews, okay? That's what they're going to do, because that's what happens, unless people stand up and say something, which gets into my next point. There is a huge conversation about what the church's response to this needs to be. What should the church be saying? What should pastors be saying? And look, you've got a lot of people saying, if your church didn't mention Charlie Kirk, you need to find a new church. Generally speaking, I agree with that. I actually agree with that. There are a couple of cases in which I don't agree with it. One being, well, here, I'll get into why I agree with it. I'll get into why I agree with it first, then I'll talk about why there are some cases in which you don't need to leave your church. The reason I agree with that sentiment, with the idea, is because in 2020, when George Floyd, the sainted fentanyl addict, who died of a fentanyl overdose, according to the autopsy, when he died of his fentanyl overdose, what did the majority of evangelical churches across the country, even some Catholic, what did the majority of these churches do? For weeks, months. These people, for weeks, for months, what did they do? They started to have people preach on, and they started to put out content. They started put out articles on the Gospel Coalition and Christianity Today, lecturing you and I on how we're all inherently racist, and we need to repent of the quote unquote murder of George Floyd, and we need that white people are inherently evil, and the only thing that they can do is give reparations and allow for black people to destroy the entire country, and that this is a white person's fault, this is a white man's fault. And that the Bible calls for justice. The Bible calls for justice, and it calls for social justice. It calls for racial justice. We got lectured on that for months by pastors, by massive evangelical institutions and figures. They lectured us on how we're pathetic, stupid, inherently racist idiots who deserve to be belittled and deserve to be stolen from for the sake of a bunch of people, well, for the sake of one guy who's a fentanyl addict. That's what we were lectured on. And a bunch of Christians don't like to be lectured on that because it's heresy. It's false teaching. And I'm not joking when I say this. Like this is actually what you have a bunch of these massive institutions, Christianity Today, the Gospel Coalition, like this is what their headlines were. So Christianity Today says, George Floyd left a gospel legacy in Houston. That was what they put out right after George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose, about his supposed gospel legacy that he left in Houston, which is completely fake because he was a drug addict, and I don't even know what that means. So they sainted him. They wrote this whole article about George Floyd. He was such a good gospel guy. Everybody there, they knew him as Big Floyd or something. It just was ridiculous. It's a bunch of word vomit, word salad. It's disgusting. And then Gospel Coalition 2020, June 6, 2020, unmasking racism starting with me. We got to unmask our racism. You got to start with yourself. You're inherently racist. Unmask it, okay? And then you go even further than that into 2024 as we move forward. Instead of Christianity Today and the Gospel Coalition saying, hey, we shouldn't have just called everybody a racist. We're not going to do that anymore. No, they double down. They have articles like Black Christian leaders find hope with Kamala Harris. And then after Trump gets elected, Russell Moore writes how to get through the next 4 years and why Donald Trump threatens to trump the gospel. And then prior to 2020, you had these same institutions writing articles like the Gospel Coalition saying, election 2016, why should evangelicals even care anymore? Throw a little bit of nihilism in there. Yeah, throw a little bit, nothing really matters. Why should you even care? Who cares? Who cares anymore? Just throw in a little bit of nihilism. It's not like, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are basically morally equivalent. It doesn't really matter anymore, right? It's not like Donald Trump's like pro-life. It's not like he overturned Roe v. Not like he was aiming to overturn Roe v. Wade. It doesn't matter. Just who cares? It's just who cares anymore? Don't even vote evangelicals. Just leave your conviction at the door. Who cares? Then you have Christianity Today, 2016. Why I'm voting for Hillary Clinton by Ron Sider or whatever, and they're legitimizing this liberal Democrat ideology that's rooted in a false, sinful anthropological presupposition, and they're championing this, and they're pushing it out to millions of pastors across the country. The guy who I used to co-host this podcast with, Nick Gibson, who's a pastor of one of the bigger churches here in Madison, Wisconsin, High Point Church, that I went to for 10 years and then left when they decided that they weren't going to preach the gospel anymore and that they were going to support people murdering babies. He was heavily influenced by guys like Russell Moore. This is happening at the local level. Like, these guys have massive influence, okay? Christianity Today, the Gospel Coalition, they have huge influence. A lot of pastors read this garbage. They read it, they internalize it, and then they push it out to their congregants. And they hide behind so-called exegetical preaching. You're not doing exegetical preaching if you're telling white people that they're inherently racist. That's called lying. And it's called a fake narrative. And it's called, there's nowhere in the Bible that actually says anything close to that. And so you should stop doing that as heresy. But they don't. Because this is what they truly believe. They believe in the critical race theory. They believe in the Marxism that undergirds all of these ideologies. They believe in the Rousseauian concept of the human person, of human nature, of the sexual being, the Freudian idea that the sexual is the primary thing. Whatever sexually is gratifying is the primary thing to pursue in life. That's what they believe. They believe in all of these ideologies that are contrary to Scripture. And yet, over 50, 60 years in the United States, those ideologies have made their way over and over and over again, slowly have crept into the church and have become married in this synchronizing way to the Bible, to Scripture, to Christ, and there's all these ideologies of, well, you can, okay, here's another one. This is Gospel Coalition, 2017. Jesus never mentioned homosexuality by Sam Alberry. So they start creeping in these little, did you know that Jesus never mentioned homosexuality? Did you know that? Yeah, well, just throw that into a sermon every once in a while. Which is not, did he mention it? Well, it's not technically a lie. It's not technically a lie. Because he didn't ever say the word homosexuality. It's not technically a lie. But Jesus did say that what God has joined together, let no man separate, man and woman. So he talked about marriage. He talked about gender roles. He talked about the fact that God instituted marriage between one man and one woman. And in that way, he implicitly talked about homosexuality, condemning it. But they use false exegesis. They rely on the fact that most people in the American church are biblically illiterate and don't actually care, and are just there for their little moral fix on Sunday to make themselves feel moral and good while they go out into the rest of their lives and do whatever they want to do. And so that's why people get frustrated here, because those same people who are lecturing us for 60 years and over the past 10 years at a higher level, at a higher rate, we're lecturing everybody and belittling everybody on how you're inherently racist and how sexuality is much broader in the Bible than what you thought it was, and how, polygamy and homosexuality and transgenderism, those are, how are you gonna say that we can't be polygamous? How are you gonna say that we can't be homosexuality? Well, that word word in Greek means that, and they start changing everything. They started changing everything, and it crept in slowly but surely. And the church didn't have the guardrails up because all of the institutions were run by the people who were creeping in, who were making this ideology manifest in the church, making this syncretistic, making this ideology, marrying this ideology to Christianity. Of course, it can't actually be married, because then you love one and you hate the other. You can't serve two gods, the God of liberalism or the God of the Bible. And that culminated in a lot of ways for a lot of people in 2020 in the riots and the George Floyd debacle. And a lot of Christians sat in their pews Sunday after Sunday listening to how they were inherently racist and they needed to repent. My church, my old church, previous co-host of this podcast, had a black pastor come in after George Floyd died and preach on reparations and on the justification for burning cities down, the biblical justification for burning cities down. And I said to him, hey, Nick, maybe, I was like, that was all false teaching, right? You agree that was all false teaching? He said, yeah, it was false teaching. It wasn't right. It was wrong. And I said, oh, thank God. Thank God you know that. Maybe you should tell the congregants that was false teaching and maybe apologize for having that guy come and preach, and maybe just tell him, you can't come back. And thought that it would be like a no-brainer. Thought it would. It was not for him. He was like, no, if people in my church can't hear that opinion, then they have the problem. And people left. People left the church. Good on them. I didn't. I should have. But they left the church because they're being theologically gaslit by their pastor, being told that you're the problem if you have a problem with false teaching, that actually it's not the false teaching, it's you. You're the problem. You are the major problem, not the false teaching. False teaching can slide. You shut your mouth, you racist. You shut your mouth, you stupid, idiotic, fundamentalist conservative. You shut your mouth, you Christian nationalist. Shut your mouth. Shut up. Don't have an opinion. No, because these people have been oppressed for too long, apparently. They've been oppressed. They've had such horrible oppression, all of these 2020 minorities who are getting government handouts like we've never seen in human history before, are living in frickin' brand new high-rises that are low-income housing, that are built for them, that my tax dollars are going towards. Those people who are getting handouts from the church, who are infiltrating the doctrine of the church, who are changing the doctrine of racial justice, who are making the church into a social liberal program or a social liberal institution in which they can enforce their congregants through implicit bias to vote for Democrats. Like, those are the oppressed people. Those are the people who have had the hardest lives. And none of us bought it. None of the actual conservatives bought it. The fake conservatives who were more interested in keeping the status quo and not rocking the boat, they were totally fine with it. They had absolutely no problem with it because they don't have conviction and they don't even know what they believe. They're actually liberals, but they think that they're conservative. They were fine with it, but a lot of people were angry about it. And so now when Charlie Kirk, who was actually a Christian, who proclaimed the gospel in more places than any of us will proclaim the gospel in our entire lives, he did that every day, day in and day out, in different cities across the country, different campuses, calling people to repentance, trying to change people's minds, trying to help people live a flourishing life. And you don't mention the fact, if your church didn't or your pastor, they don't mention the fact that guy got a bullet put through his neck for being a Christian, but they mention the fentanyl addict. That's where people are getting frustrated. That's where people are angry. It's not that, oh yeah, you just don't mention Charlie Kirk. Look, if you didn't mention George Floyd and you don't mention Charlie Kirk, I think you're a coward, but fine, whatever. You're at least consistent. Fine. You're not a hypocrite. You're just kind of passive and like whatever. If you are lecturing everybody on sainting George Floyd and then not mentioning Charlie Kirk, who was an actual Christian, George Floyd wasn't, but Charlie Kirk was an actual Christian who got a bullet put through his neck in front of his children and wife while preaching the gospel and telling people about the truth. He's a martyr, by the way. You don't mention that guy. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your church. There's something wrong with the entire structure. When the Gospel Coalition writes a mealy-mouthed, nonsensical, idiotic article about how, like, we need to just love each other and, like, hate is bad and the world is sinful. And it's like, no, tell me where this ideology comes from. Tell me why they put a bullet through his neck, Gospel Coalition, because you know. Why did they do it? Because they're liberals, because they've constructed a fake Messiah, because they've constructed a God in their own image, because they worship the golden calves of Gavin Ortlund and Russell Moore and David French. That's why. That's why. That's why. Because our society worships liberalism, the gods of CNN, MSNBC, because they're having ideology crammed down their throat from the age of 6 years old on, this nihilistic, nonsensical, life-hating ideology, this Marxist ideology that drives them to insanity. That's why they're committing murder against people that they disagree with. And the Gospel Coalition will mention that. They'll just do this bullshit. Oh, everybody's a sinner. Life is hard. Everything's bad. No, tell me why. Why is that happening? Why? What ideologies create that? Because that wasn't happening 60 years ago. Why wasn't that happening 60, 70, 80 years ago? Happened with JFK, and we can talk about CIA and all of that. Whatever, that's aside. Why is that happening? When Martin Luther King Jr. got assassinated in the 60s, was that ideology? Was that what? You can't say, look, if you're not going to say that this was politically motivated, if you're not going to say that this is ideologically motivated, then don't lecture me on how MLK getting assassinated was politically motivated. No, just mental health. It's just freaking mental health. That's all it is. Just mental health. George Floyd, who people think got murdered, they think he got murdered, which he didn't, but they think that he got murdered because Derek Chauvin was a racist. No. There's no such thing as ideology. That doesn't make people do anything. No, it's just mental health or something. Yeah, just mental health. Anyways, yeah, it's just mental health. It can't be anything else. It couldn't possibly be ideology. And that's what these Christians, they'll cram the ideology down your throat when it's necessary. When it is necessary for them to maintain power, when they're using it as a way to play the Marxist power structure game, they will cram it down your throat. George Floyd, there was all ideology. It was white supremacy. It was inherent racism. Charlie Kirk, no, that was people are bad. The world's evil. And how do we mourn this? How do we cry about it together? How do we hold hands after this happens? Don't mention ideology. Don't mention the progressive rot in the center of the church. Don't mention the progressive rot in the center of the public institutions like the public school system and the universities. Don't mention the progressive and liberal rot at the center of society itself that drive people like this to do things that are abhorrent and evil out of ideological obsession, out of the fact that they've been programmed and groomed into acting in this nihilistic and evil and vile way. Don't mention that. Make sure the churches don't know what they're combating. Make sure the churches have no idea what they're living in. Make sure that they have no idea how to talk against us, to speak against us. Make sure they just sit there with their mouths shut about what's happening politically and cry about it with their congregants and talk about how we need to mourn rather than actually vote for people and actually engage in the political process in a way that is in accordance with the Bible. How about you write a frickin' article on that? How about you do that? Instead of mealy-mouth, nonsense, postmodern, both-sidesism garbage, how about you write an article saying, hey, this type of ideology makes people want to kill their opponents. How about you try that one time? One time. Gospel Coalition, Christianity Today, all they do, slander and trash people that they disagree with. That's it. They're liberals. They're agents of the liberal machine. They're agents of the devil. They're agents of Satan. They're agents of wickedness. And that's what they do. And churches all across the country buy into that, fundamentally buy into that. And they push it out to their congregants. And they belittle you if you say anything. They belittle you if you speak out against it. They kick you out. They ostracize you. They tell you you're a lunatic, that you're a half-cocked liar, that you're making things up, that there's something wicked, desperately wrong with you, that you're causing disunity and you're not being charitable. That's what they do. That's all the language. It's like the 6 talking points. Oh, you disagree with me? You're not charitable. Oh, you think that liberalism is bad and that Christians shouldn't vote for murdering babies? Well, you're not being charitable. You're not being charitable. Charity. You're not being charitable. You're not being, well, we've redefined charity. We've redefined it. Well, what does it mean? Well, we've redefined it. Yeah, it's like charity actually just means postmodern. It just means you're not letting people believe in their own truth. That's what it means. And no, I don't want people to believe in their own truth. If they do that, things go bad quickly. I want them to believe in the truth. I want them to believe in Jesus and in the Bible. And I want them to live in accordance with that conviction and in accordance with that truth. And so when people are frustrated that you don't mention Charlie Kirk or that your church doesn't mention Charlie Kirk, it's not because they want to push a political narrative. It's because they want to push a real narrative, a true narrative. They want people to know what the truth is. They want people to know that Charlie Kirk was a martyr who died for his faith. They want people to know that the country is heading in a disastrous direction. And that, like Bonhoeffer said, the church's responsibility is to be the conscience of the state. And that if the church has no conscience, the state has no conscience. And the state grows and dominates. And if the state grows and dominates and is run by people who have no conscience, then nobody knows what the hell could happen, but it's going to be horrible. It will be atrocious. It will be what we saw in the 20th century, probably times 50 because of the technological advancements of our time. You have no clue what happens when the church is lulled to sleep. We don't know the outcome of this. We have no clue. And if your church is sitting on the sidelines playing both sides, leave the church. It's time for you to find a new church. It's time for you to plant a new church. Stop sitting around in pews, shutting your mouth when it's time to open your mouth and tell the truth. The American church has no clue what's coming. We have no clue what's coming. We don't have any clue because we've been lulled to sleep. Pastors playing both sides of the aisle, trying to make their money, get their big mega church, trying to get that machine, keep that machine running, keep it running at any cost. The gospel, don't need it. Make a new one. Doesn't matter. Sexual morality, don't need it. Just tell people they can do whatever they want. Murder, who cares? Baby is being murdered, who cares? Who cares? If I tell people that we can't vote for people who murder babies, I'm not going to have my machine anymore. I'm not going to have my money-making machine. How am I going to live? Wait, have faith? Faith? What? No. Jesus wants us to be charitable. No, Jesus wants us to be passive. No, that's the constructed Jesus in their own mind. If your church didn't mention Charlie Kirk, but they did mention George Floyd, you need to leave the church because you're not going to a biblical church. There's a couple of quotes. This is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, the mission of the government consists in serving the dominion of Christ on earth by the exercise of the worldly power of the sword and of justice. Government serves Christ by establishing and maintaining an outward justice by means of the sword, which is given to it and to it alone in deputyship for God. All right? So the government is here to serve the dominion of Christ. I want all the liberals. I want to hear liberals start saying that Dietrich Bonhoeffer is some Christian nationalist. I want to hear it because I believe that. I think that that's biblical, but maybe Dietrich Bonhoeffer is like a scary bad Christian nationalist. Here's what he also said. He said, it is part of the church's office of guardianship that she shall call sin by its name and that she shall warn men against sin. For righteousness exalteth a nation, both in time and in eternity. But sin is perdition for the people, both temporal and eternal perdition. If the church did not do this, she would be incurring part of the guilt for the blood of the wicked. This warning against sin is delivered to the congregation openly and publicly, and whoever will not hear it passes judgment on himself. That's the responsibility of the church. It's to call sin sin. It's to call their people to repentance. It's to tell people, hey, guys, we live in a political world. You can't get out of that. You can't compartmentalize. You live in a political world. And your politics have to be in line with the Bible, or you're not a Christian. Your allegiance is with your politics, not with the Bible. You need to vote in accordance with the Bible. If you vote for people who enable the slaughter of infants, you're not a Christian. You're not a Christian. You can't be a Christian, believe it or not. If you vote for people who murder babies and who enable the murder of babies, you cannot biblically be a Christian. It is impossible. There's no logic found in Scripture that says that would be doable, that would be possible, that is within the confines of what it means to be a Christian. There isn't anything in the Bible that says anything like that. 2 more quotes. Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers, uneducated. Definitely not as smart as Russell Moore. Definitely just some idiot guy who had no impact on the church. No education, no piece of paper. Him and G.K. Chesterton. Kind of fat, kind of no. Prince of Preachers, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, pastor in church history. He is talking about slavery, and I've mentioned this. He hated slavery. Now ask yourself, is slavery worse than murdering babies? There is one answer. No, it is not worse than murdering babies. Here's what he says. He says, I do from my inmost soul detest slavery. And although I commune at the Lord's table with men of all creeds, yet with a slaveholder, I hold no fellowship of any sort or kind. Whenever one has called upon me, I have considered it my duty to express my detestation of his wickedness, and I would as soon think of receiving a murderer into my church as a man-stealer. Okay. He wouldn't even commune with these people. And I'm certain that he would say the same thing about people who slaughter infants, right? Who murder 3,000 babies every single day, who enable the murder of 3,000 babies every single day, who decapitate children and poison them. I think that he would say the same thing. He said this though. He even goes further. This weird Christian nationalism, weird, Charles Spurgeon, this weird fundamentalist, like what in the world, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the big Christian nationalist. Spurgeon says, be better that every white man, woman, and child be murdered in the South and 1,000 unions be dissolved than human slavery be allowed to exist in peace and quietness in the southern states of the American Union. I don't know. Just some lunatic, just some crazy fundamentalist. Yeah. Charles Spurgeon got no real conviction, doesn't know how to read the Bible, right? David French, Russell Moore. Inject my veins with more of David French. Inject my veins with more moral equivocation from Gavin Ortland. Inject my veins with the idea that the big sky monster, the big climate monster is going to come and kill me in my sleep. And that the babies being murdered every single day, they don't matter. That Gavin Ortland thinks more. He said in one of his videos, he thinks every single day about climate change. Every single day. It's so close to his heart. Yeah, put some more of that, let me snort some more of whatever he's snorting. Let me have a little bit more of that. Let me have some more of this idiot ideology, this unbiblical garbage that is destroying the church from within. Don't give me the fundamental, Charles Spurgeon, are you kidding me? Just some fundamentalist guy who doesn't know what he's talking. Dietrich Bonhoeffer? What? Dietrich Bonhoeffer? What was it? The Christian nationalist, right? Because that's the argument you'd have to make. You'd have to call him a Christian nationalist, obviously, because he believes that Christians should be Christians and should vote on their Christian belief, right? And should act in the political realm in accordance with their Christian beliefs. That's what he believes. He's some crazy Christian nationalist. Russell Moore is disgusted with the actions and beliefs of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. What a sick individual. I'll tell you what. Here's how you know if somebody is actually a Christian, okay? It's what they're willing to give up. So ask yourself a question. What the hell has David French, Russell Moore, and Gavin Ortland ever given up for the sake of the gospel? Nothing. They live in nice homes, in nice neighborhoods, in rich areas. They make a lot of money. These guys are living in huge mansions. They're profiting off of their heresy. They're profiting off of their false teaching, and they're profiting off of their equivocations. They're profiting off of their blindness. There's no cost. They run massive institutions. They do it all in 401k, not 401k, sorry, 501c3s. They don't pay taxes. They rake in the dough. They make money. They do what they want. There's no cost for them. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was hanged. He was hanged because he tried to assassinate Hitler, because he was part of an assassination attempt on Hitler. And he was hanged. And guess what? He had the opportunity to get out of that. There was a guard who was willing to let him out, was willing to let him break free. And he said, nope, do it. What would that say about me? What would that say? Oh, I got special privileges? No, here's the cost. I told the truth. I did the right thing. I tried to warn the church. I tried to kill the Fuhrer. And you know what? Kill me, murder me. Put my neck in that noose and murder me, and I will live in glory for eternity. That's what he did. That's what he said. That is a real Christian. Russell Moore is not a real Christian. Gavin Ortlund, I'm not going to say he's not a Christian, but he is toying around with his soul like it's some frickin' game. And he's toying around with the souls of everybody else like it's some frickin' pathetic game when people are murdering their political opponents, when people are murdering 3,000 babies a day, and he's morally equivocating every damn day on his stupid Truth Unites podcast thing, okay? David French is a moral equivocating non-Christian, okay? Charles Spurgeon, when speaking out against slavery because it's evil, the greatest crime of his time. New York Times, they used to release his sermons every single week on the New York Times. It went out to everybody in America. He was massively famous. He made a bunch of money off of that deal. He starts preaching about slavery. What do? Well, they take his sermons out of the New York Times. Why do they take his sermons out of the New York Times? Because he's talking about slavery, the biggest issue of they start cutting out the stuff about slavery. And then what? What does Charles Spurgeon do? He say, "Oh yeah, just keep the peace. Just don't do anything about it. I guess Christians can be slave owners and they can also." No. He says, you don't cut my stuff out. You're done. Guess what? He loses a bunch of money, almost destroys all of his ministries, but he knew the cost. And guess they made it through. They made it through because God provided for them. But he knew the cost. He knew the cost, and he was like, fine, yeah, destroy my ministry. I'm not going to compromise on the gospel. What's at stake here is my soul. That's what's at stake for Bonhoeffer and for Spurgeon. What was at stake for Russell Moore, for Gavin Ortlund. These guys don't give a trash about your soul. They don't give a trash about the truth. They do not care. They will morally equivocate to the day they die. They will not tell you that if you vote for people who want to murder children, that you're in the wrong and that your soul is going to rot in hell. They won't tell you that. If your pastor isn't telling you that, if your pastor's obsessed with these guys, get into a different church. It's not about MAGA movement, okay? I've got my problems with the MAGA movement. It's about the fact that a martyr, a Christian, was slaughtered. And most churches in America who are wholly indebted to the liberal regime shut their mouth. They didn't say anything. But when a fentanyl addict died, we sainted him. We made it all about him. Church is about now social justice. That's why people are pissed off. And that's why I'm pissed off. So that's my thoughts. See you in the next one.